Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Claire Broughton, and today we'll be discussing Chapter 2 for Theories of Crime Causation, and we'll be looking at where theories come from. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so today's criminology is very science-based. We place a lot of emphasis on theories, policies, and practices that use social sciences techniques. In fact, the American Society of Criminology created experimental criminology division, wherein there's an increasing emphasis on randomized controlled experiments because they believe that experiments or the experimental design is used more often in the natural sciences and would be the most scientific of all types of research designs. Now, according to John Lobb, who's a famous criminologist, famous theorist in criminology, there are three eras in criminology. First, you had the golden age of research from 1900 to 1930. Then you have the golden age of theory from 1930 to 1960. Then you had theory testing from 1960 to 2000. And he believes that modern criminology is more scientific than the armchair criminology of the past. For those of you who don't know what armchair criminology is, armchair criminology refers to basically sitting in your arms and in your chair and theorizing, predicting, explaining criminological events and crime based on thinking, mental processes without actually going out to conduct experiment and to test whatever your theory you had formulated in your mind. So criminology has evolved and has gone a long way from armchair philosophy and now armchair criminology, and now there's a focus on scientific criminology. So what is scientific criminology? Scientific criminology involves the systematic collection of related facts. There's emphasis on the scientific method. There also is the need for general laws, such as experimentation or observation, and also control for academic discourse. There is a need for acceptance into the scientific tradition and also an emphasis on a worthwhile subject. The goal of criminological research is to construct theories or models that improve our understanding of criminal behavior and help us create effective strategies to deal with the crime problem. So that's why whenever we test a theory, we try to come up with hypotheses, which is basically a tentative explanation for different sets of facts or different variables based on that specific theory. So what is a theory? As I mentioned, a theory attempts to explain, predict, describe a phenomenon. It's a set of interrelated propositions, okay? And there would usually be uh, either a cause or an underlying cause, which can be unicausal, or um, an underlying motive for explaining crime. Theories give meaning to observations. And the problem is that criminological theories may be difficult to test because we are a social science instead of a hard science or a natural science. So human behavior is difficult to predict. This figure is shows you the process of theory building. Okay, I'll let you go over it. Now, what is the role of research and experimentation? Research, first of all, is the use of standardized systematic procedures in the search for knowledge. There are several types of research. First, there's the applied versus pure, and second, there's the primary versus secondary. Pure research is mainly focused on contributing to an existing body of knowledge. Applied research aims to apply the knowledge into specific policies. Primary research is when you collect original data. Secondary research is when you use existing data to explain or test your hypotheses. What are the stages of scientific research? There are 4 stages. First, problem identification. Here you have to identify what's the research topic that you want to examine. Second, development of a research design. So based on your research problem, you have to create a design that will serve or suit the purposes of your research and will best be able to contribute to solving the problem or shedding light on your research problem. Third, choice of data collection techniques. Here, your data collection must suit your research topic. Okay, so whatever your research topic is, you have to base your data collection on your research topic. And fourth, review of findings. Now, problem identification, which is the first step. Okay, it's the first step in any research. Here, you choose a problem or issue to be studied. Most research in criminology explores issues of causality. And as I mentioned, it frequently involves testing hypotheses. How do you get these hypotheses? These hypotheses would be to test theories. So there are a lot of criminological theories that we'll be discussing later, and hypotheses can be drawn from these theories. Now, for problem identification, you need to know these concepts. First, a variable. A variable is a thing that is measured, okay? And it's a concept that can be operationalized. It can undergo measurable changes. What is operationalization? So operationalization is the process of turning a simple hypothesis into one that is testable. So here you make the concepts in the hypotheses measurable and you turn them into variables. What is the development of a research design? First, you have to know the definition of a research design. A research design it's the logic and structure inherent in any particular approach to data gathering. For a research design based on experiment, there would be an example would be one group pre-test and post-test. So the problem with this type of simple research design is it does not eliminate confounding effects or competing hypotheses. The example given in the book is in a prison. So what prison administrators did was to reduce white sugar in the diet because they hypothesized that reduction in white sugar, okay, in the diet of prisoners or inmates would make them less aggressive. So they tested the level of aggression before reducing white sugar from the inmate's diet. This would be 0 times 0, 1, or 1. And then post-test, after they had reduced white sugar from the diet, they would measure again the level of violence of the inmates. And this is indicated by the figure O2 in this particular slide. The problem with this simple research design is that it does not eliminate confounding effects or competing hypotheses. For example, in that scenario, okay, reducing white sugar from the diet of inmates may have led to the reduction in violence. However, there may have been other causes that have contributed to the reduction in violence. For example, either a new chaplain, a new priest might have come, or a new mentor might have come into the prison and taught more peaceful resolution of conflicts, or the most aggressive of inmates, the most violent of inmates may have been transferred to another institution. They may have implemented more programs that enable the inmates to be more peaceful and are therapeutic. So in that scenarios, because of the existence of all these other confounding effects or explanations, the reduction in white sugar in the diet of the inmates may not necessarily have led with certainty to the reduction of violence. It may have been all these other factors that have contributed in the reduction of violence of the inmates. Okay, what is validity in research design? First, you have internal validity. What is an internal validity? Internal validity is the certainty that experimental interventions did indeed cause the changes observed in the study group. The example I gave is For the experiment, the intervention would be to reduce the white sugar in their diet. So your hypothesis, as I said, was that reduction in white sugar in the diet would lead to less violence, less aggression in prisons. So how are you certain that that was the cause? The reduction in white sugar led to the reduction in violence. If you're very certain, 100% certain, then you have internal validity. The problem in that scenario, in that case example, is that it lacks internal validity because you do not control for every other factors that may or changes that may have occurred in prison that may have led to reduction in aggression of inmates. So what is external validity? External validity is the ability to generalize research findings to other settings. So how generalizable? The results of that study, can you generalize it? Can you apply it to other institutions, to other correctional institutions in the US or to other prison settings outside the US? So that would be external validity. So external validity, I'll give you one example of a threat to external validity. So one threat to external validity would be experimenter bias. So if you are an experimenter, okay, and you have your bias or your favorite, you have favorites in terms of the certain subjects in your either your experimental or control group, and then you show favorable behavior, okay, towards these members, it may have affected the outcome or the result of your experiment. Okay, I want you to watch this video on threats to internal validity. I won't be able to play it here because this system does not allow, it does not capture recordings or sounds from my computer. So threats to external validity, an example would be self-selection. Self-selection is where the subjects are allowed to decide whether or not they want to participate in a study. So self-selected subjects would be more interested in participating than others, and they may respond more readily to experimental intervention or treatment. An example would be depression, okay? So if there's an experiment indicating that depression is a serious problem, okay? And your experiment, your intervention would be to enable individuals to deal with depression, okay? People who are depressed may think that, okay, depression is a serious problem, so they may choose to participate in the study because they are allowed to select whether or not to participate in the study. Then they may respond more readily to the intervention. So one way to cure or to solve this problem of self-selection as a threat to external validity is not to allow participants to self-select. So if you have an experiment, for example, the experimenter must be the one to select whether or not the subject is placed in an experimental group or in the control group. Okay. Or another way to solve this threat to external validity of self-selection is to allow random assignment to either the experimental group or to the control group. Okay. Now I want you to watch this video on threats to external validity. This is also a good video. Again, I can't show it because my computer would not record sounds from videos that are played in the computer. So let's look at experimental and quasi-experimental research designs. There are experimental designs are controlled experiments, okay? Here, there's an attempt to hold conditions other than the experimental intervention constant. So this is only possible, most likely possible in the hard sciences, natural sciences. What is a quasi-experimental design? Here, the researcher is given control over the when and to whom of measurement, but not exposure to the intervention. It's less powerful than controlled experiments. Okay. Let's look at this pre-test, post-test control group design. So the experimental group and the control group. To know whether or not the treatment, okay, the treatment in the experiment is actually working, you have to have a control group. The control group is the one who is not exposed to experimental intervention. And it increases the power of design. A good example would be in the natural sciences or even in medicine, for cancer treatment. Okay, so you would have an experimental group wherein you would be giving the members of the experimental group the cancer treatment, the cancer medication. If your research design or your research topic is to test whether or not a particular cancer treatment or cancer medicine is more effective than others. So the experimental group would get that cancer treatment, your control group would not. Okay. So if the experimental group members, if the members showed a marked improvement in their conditions and the control group did not, all other things being equal, then you would know that the cancer treatment or the cancer medication worked because it's the only thing that was different or varied between the experimental group and the control group. Randomization is also critical to the success of experimental design. It is a process by which subjects are assigned to study groups without biases or differences resulting from selection. As I mentioned, no self-selection is allowed and no personal judgment is used in subject assignment. This is because self-selection is a threat to internal validity, and randomization controls for this particular type of threat. Now, your choice of data collection techniques would depend on your hypotheses and what you're actually testing. What are you trying to examine? There are several types of data gathering strategies. First, you have surveys, then you have case studies, you have participant observation, you have self-reporting, and then you have secondary analysis and secondary research. So what are surveys? Surveys use questionnaires or surveys use questionnaires to gather survey data. For example, you may interview respondents in person, over the telephone, by email, by fax, or by mail. An example of a survey would be National Crime Victimization Survey. A survey question included in the survey may either be open-ended, wherein the interviewee can explain as much as he likes or she likes, or it can be close-ended, meaning that the interviewer has pre-selected answers to a specific question, similar to multiple choice questions. Now, I want you to watch this video because it will explain how to design a survey. It's also a good video. Now, what are case studies? Case studies, unlike surveys, are in-depth investigations into individual cases. Think of ethnographies, okay? So life history of a specific subject, one individual. One good thing is that it gives you a very comprehensive picture of the evolution of one person into criminal activity, why that person engaged in crime, what caused him, for example, to be a habitual offender or serial killer. Now, the problem with case studies it suffers from high levels of subjectivity, but it allows you to provide it, but it provides you the opportunity to examine individual cases in depth. Again, I want you to watch this video on case studies. Oh, here. I want you to watch this video on case studies. Participant observation. Participant observation involves various strategies in which the researcher observes a group by participating in the activities of the group. Researchers may operate undercover or make their purposes and identity known from the start. So there are main types. The participant as observer, wherein the participant makes known that he is a researcher and doesn't interfere in the group activities. For example, if a researcher wants to examine gang activity, so the researcher will contact the local gang and then tell that gang that he or she is a researcher and observe the activities of the gang without participating, without interfering, without intervening in any way in the activities of the gang member. And this is a rich way. This actually brings about an in-depth analysis of gang activity because you're able to immerse yourself in the daily activities of gang members. The second type is the observer as complete participant. Here, the observer is, instead of being just as an observer, the researcher is a complete participant. Sometimes the observer is asked to participate in gang activities, for example, acting as courier, transmitting information from one gang member to another, and so on. It is important for the researcher to avoid influencing the group, identifying too closely with the group, or developing aversion to the group. Again, watch this video on your own. Now, self-reporting. Here, subjects are asked to report rates of certain behaviors, such as crime, and it may provide information when official reports are lacking. It may be in the form of survey research, but it's not necessary that it's surveys. For example, journals can be self-reporting. Some techniques, such as introspection and personal reflection, are purely subjective. Secondary analysis is new analysis or evaluation of existing data gathered by other researchers. This is also a potentially rich source of information, and you can come up with surprising results. But you need to know that if you conduct secondary analysis, it's possible that the the data that you're analyzing was collected for a completely different purpose and may not contain information or questions that are relevant to your study. Problems in data collection. So first, scientific observation must meet two criteria. First, intersubjectivity, meaning that any independent observer sees the same thing under the same circumstances. So for example, if I see a tree, everyone else who looks at that object must see a tree. Okay. I can't see a tree. There would be no intersubjectivity if I saw a tree, but someone else saw a house. And we're looking at the same thing. Next, replicability. This means that the results of the experiment can be replicated, can be repeated by some other researcher, and the results would be the same. Okay. So review of findings. Most data would be subjected to statistical analysis. There are two types: descriptive statistics, wherein you merely describe, summarize, highlight relationships within data. Example would be when you summarize, mean, mode, mean, mode, and standard deviation. Inferential statistics is when you attempt to generalize findings by specifying how likely they are to be true for other populations or locations. Measures of central tendency include mode, median, and mean. The median is the mean is the average. The mode is the most frequently occurring number in your study, okay, in your sample. The median is the medium number that cuts off the upper half from the lower half. Standard deviation is a measure of dispersion. It measures how far an individual person or an individual study subject deviates, okay, or is far from the average. Correlation shows interdependence between variables. It can be positive correlation or negative correlation. Positive correlation means that as one variable increases, the other variable, the dependent variable, increases. If it's negative correlation, then if there's an increase in your independent variable, there would be a decrease in your dependent variable. Now, a test of significance provide researchers with confidence that results are true and not of sampling error. So what's the difference between quantitative and qualitative methods? Quantitative methods are techniques that produce measurable results. So quantitative measures, you conduct statistical analysis on the data to come up with inferences. You are able to measure exactly how much your independent variables affect your dependent variable. Now, a qualitative method does not use quantitative techniques. They produce, subjective results, or the results are difficult to quantify. Qualitative methods sometimes are also good. Okay, they're not inferior to quantitative methods. At times, they're even better than quantitative methods. So the use of qualitative methods should be encouraged because a lot of times it provides more insights into a research topic. Values and ethics in the conduct of research. So values affect all stages of the research project. And, as a researcher, you're never free from biases, but you have to control the effect of biases by being aware of them at the outset, because these biases may threaten the validity of research results. So one way to solve the problems of values and ethics in the conduct of research is to obtain the informed consent of participants. Okay, so usually, what an actual research, subjects who participate in a research study sign an informed consent. So an informed consent basically informs subjects or sample study, or members of your sample as to the nature of the research, their role, their anticipated role, and the uses made of the data. In universities, there are institutional review boards, and these are boards whose members examine research proposals to determine whether or not these research proposals comply with ethical standards. In fact, as a researcher in a university, whenever your research is not exempt or expedited, it has to be reviewed by members of the IRB, the Institutional Review Board. Now let's look at writing the research report. Here are the different parts of the research report. You'll learn more about this in your research methods. As an example, you'll have to write the title page. You have to have a table of contents, an introduction. You state you state the problem. For the introduction, you give a picture. You give the surrounding circumstances, and the current state of events that would help identify the problem. Review of existing literature. You summarize prior literature, you systematize them, and you synthesize them so that you know what prior research has stated, or what the results of prior research are on the same topic as you are examining currently. So you have the statement of hypotheses. You have to basically lay out what you're testing. You have to describe your research plan, and then findings and results, analysis and discussion, and summary and conclusions. You also have to have a list of references. In criminology, you usually use the APA citation, which is the American Psychological Association citation style. If you're writing a legal paper, you have to use the Blue Book system of citation. Now, writing for publication. Researchers, especially academic researchers, publish in refereed journals. So when we submit our article to a peer-reviewed journal, it gets reviewed, blind review, by other peers, by other academics who have written similarly on that topic. It's double blind, meaning that the author, for example, if I submit to Journal of Criminal Justice, I would not know who is reviewing my work. And the reviewers who review my work would not know who I am. So it's double blind. We don't know each other. I don't know who the reviewers are, and they don't know who the author is. So the peer review process will ensure that only research that is worthwhile or of quality would be published. In fact, peer reviewers of journals have been known to be very strict, and usually when they review an article, they have a lot of revisions, comments on how to improve your work. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here with me and going through these slides, listening to the chapter. I hope that you learned a lot from this chapter. You will learn more about this in your research methods, which is a completely separate class. Anyway, have a good day.